The Ways and Means Committee is now called to order. Mr. Clerk, would you please call the roll?
Alderwoman Cruzen, Alderwoman Florida.
Present.
Alderwoman Behringer.
Present.
Vice Chairman Williamson.
Here.
Alderman Moore.
Here.
Alderman French. Alderman Vaccaro.
Present.
Alderman Carter. Chairman Kennedy.
Here.
6 present.
Okay, we're here to
7
continue.
present.
7 present.
I apologize.
Okay, then we'll first have up Paul Payne, who will explain to us what ENA, they met yesterday, and you explain what they did.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Good morning, members of the Ways and Means Committee. I do have some handouts. Let's take that. I've got one here. Thank you.
Should have gone to you.
What you should have before you is a packet that contains a number of exhibits, and on top of that, those exhibits is a summary page. And the Board of ENA met yesterday, and what they tried to do was try to accommodate as much as they could on the Ways and Means recommendations based on some of the amendments approved by this committee, and then with some of the limitations based on the funding that's available. And I'll go through each one of those individually, and I can take any questions after that. On the summary page, item number 1, that 214 in the Forestry Division, there was some funds added to performance. This was basically anything that was left over from anything else that follows. We just added that to per performance, so that's pretty straightforward. On item number 2, on the Parks Division, that was that ranger position that had been requested per the committee's request. Item number 3, there was the committee had requested a number of ranger positions. There was funding, and I'll talk about that, but we did add at ENA's level 1 position, sufficient funding for that. Item number 4, and this is one of the reasons we didn't have a sufficient monies, because one of the reductions was in the Peace Officer Training Fund, which is a specific statutorily enabled fund that is somewhat limited, so we couldn't take that money and just throw that into the general fund revenue, so that is requesting the restoration of that reduction by the Ways and Means Committee. Item number 5, the Communications Division, this committee had recommended $10,000 to per performance employees of that Communication Division, and that was added, so you can see that addition into Fund 1117. On the asset forfeiture, 6A and 6B, the calculation of 15% was limited to the 15% of actual last 2 years of revenues. It wasn't 15% of the total budget. The total budget, because it was the first year, what we did was you just took anything that was on the books and appropriated it. But that's not annual revenues. That was what was appropriate. That was what came in for the last number of years. So the last 2 years, 15% is about $115,000. So what this appropriation, what this amendment considers is adding the $115,000 for the community-based programs, and then restoring the remaining $285 to that capital asset line of that budget. Items 7 and 8 did not come before the committee, but these are things that 7 in particular was the appropriation for the ward accounts that we had as a sort of a lump sum number going in, because we didn't have the ward detail at the time, but now we do have the ward detail at the time. The aldermen have worked with the BPS liaisons and gotten us. So there's some exhibits attached which have the detail for each ward. There are also some details provided for some of the parks accounts of the capital fund as well. My understanding the Parks Committee is going to be blessing those things later, probably next week. So those have been included as well. But that's what item number 7 was. So there is no dollar impact related to that. Item number 8 on the GO bond fund, defeasance of existing debt. Given that our contemplation of the bond issue is coming up, we had originally anticipated this being in August, in which that would mean you would issue the bonds and such, so that there would not be a rollback in existing debt service levy. Since that has been postponed, what the alternative instead is to defease existing bonds, which will In other words, your appropriation will go up for outstanding debt, but your levy will stay level instead of going down. And with the thinking being that rather than dealing with a debt levy that jumps around, what you'd like to do is contain, the level of levies to stay the same. So, and of course, depending on how the GO bond issue proposal goes in future months, that will determine what next year is. But those were the amendments that E&A approved, and there's details for all of those that are attached in the packet, and if I'll entertain any questions that you may have.
Okay. Questions from members of the committee? Alderwoman Florida?
Yeah, I'll just go back over the GO bond fund defeasance of existing debt. So we're going to make sure that that levy is level.
What this entails is prepaying some existing debt.
Okay.
Right now, under the existing schedule, what you would have is a decline in the levy just on the normal schedule, which would end up in being a rollback. But given that we're contemplating a new GO bond, what we're trying to do is trying to keep that from rolling back and just keep it level, which is sort of recommended. What this also does, it does reduce your overall interest costs going forward, because over a longer term, if you prepay debt, you're no longer paying interest on that outstanding debt.
Thank you. That's it.
Okay. Alderwoman Behringer?
No questions.
Alderman Williamson?
No questions.
Alderman Moore?
No question.
Alderman French?
Yeah, Paul, I apologize for having to step out for a second. I'm looking here specifically about the park rangers, what changes were made with that, and what page is that on?
Yes, those were item number 2 and 3. So that would be of your amendments. Actually, it'd be page 1 of the detail. The first, item 2, and you can see the detail there, was the Parks Division. That was that ranger position that was recommended at this committee level. That's the first one. And item number 3 on the bottom of the page, it sort of carries over into the bottom of at the top of the next page, was addition of the Parks Ranger. Again, we did not wasn't able to, because the funding availability wasn't able to accommodate all those positions, but it did get us at least the one position, so that was what was added.
So the item number 2, that is that park ranger liaison position?
Yes, yes.
Okay, and so of the 4 park ranger positions that we asked for to provide full-time coverage in O'Fallon Park and Fairground Park, it was reduced from 4 to 1?
Yes.
And was that just added? Was that added as a general park ranger position? I know when we submitted it, we had specifically had a line item for both park ranger dash O'Fallon Park and park ranger dash Fairground Park.
Well, in the budget, there's not really such thing as a park ranger position for a particular park. That assignment would have to come from the parks, or either the parks director or in this case, the police department, which actually oversees the park rangers now. So there is no, in the civil service category, there's no assignment to particular park. It's park ranger. So
there hasn't been, but what we did was create a specific category for that, where that park ranger would be assigned.
Well, there isn't any. I mean, that something can be done administratively, but there is no Board Bill 1 item which says here's a department for O'Fallon Park or here's a department for Fairgrounds. It is simply park rangers. And so that's where, and if that was the case, and if there was an additional ranger added to any park, it would be in that unit to which it was added. But administratively, I mean, that would have to be done through administrative means, as opposed to anything else we can do here.
Okay. I mean, yeah. I mean, you say it's not there, but it's not there until we do it, and then we do note in the budget where we specifically want that to go. I mean, I know when we're looking in the budget, there are we specify in certain cases where things go. Say, for instance, the Tower Grove Park, or you saying we can't do that here on the through Board Bill 1?
I can tell you that when you look at Board Bill 1, there's a unit called Park Rangers, and that's what we added the ranger to. There is no more specificity to park rangers here, park rangers there, park rangers somewhere else. It's just,
Until and unless we do. So we do have the power to amend Board Bill 1, and we can specify specifically where we would want those to go, couldn't we?
that I don't know for sure. I mean, that may be some legal question. I'm not aware of that. But I do know the existing Board Bill 1, which we were amending, did not have any categories such as that.
Okay. So my problem is this, is that, two problems. First is that the desired effect, what we want here, is to have park rangers in O'Fallon and Fairground Park, two of the largest parks in the city. In order to have full-time coverage, you need 2 positions for each park, so that you can have 7-day-a-week coverage. That's been explained to us. And so you need 4 to cover the 2 parks, number one. And that's been reduced to 1, so that wouldn't even be able to cover one of those parks full-time. The second thing is that the reason we're doing this in the first place is because of the resistance that we've gotten from, in the past, the Parks Department, and now the Chief of Police, who is in charge, or will be as of July 1, in charge of the park rangers. So if we just added a park ranger, or even 4 park rangers, to a general park ranger position, it is more likely that those park rangers will go to Forest Park than they would O'Fallon or Fairground Park. And so that's why I feel like we need to specifically note here where we intend for those park rangers to go. And I know there's a way we can do that legislatively.
Yeah, I can't speak to the legal
Okay.
viability of that.
All right, and they did keep the communications divisions $10,000?
Yes.
And what happened with the asset forfeiture?
The asset forfeiture amount, if you recall, we were talking about 15% of the total. Well, the 15% of that you're talking about is of the 2 prior years' revenues. The total budget consisted of everything that had been accumulated in prior years. So the two prior year revenues is a smaller amount, and 15% was about $115,000. So that $115,000 was approved for the community-based programs, with the remaining that other $400 being asked to be restored to that.
The other $285,000 was sent back. So only $115,000 for community-based programs.
Correct.
Okay. All right, that's all I had.
Carl's not in there? Okay. Alderman Carter?
No questions.
Okay. The, what is this, the ward capital?
Yes.
That's item 7. Capital Fund Ward. Okay, so what exactly did they do in relation to?
If you recall, right now in Board Bill 1, you've got is ward cap, and it's just a lump sum dollar amount.
Right.
Because they were, the Board of Public Service was still working with each individual alderman to come up with the details.
Okay.
Well, now you've got the detailed exhibits.
Okay, all right. So that's all, it's just these details?
Yes. It does not, there's no dollar change there, it's just the detail behind the appropriation.
Okay. Right, are there any other questions or comments from members of the committee? If not, we could entertain a motion. What would we need? Now, we have,
This would be
Mr.
the...
Chairman, so will we still have an opportunity to make, to restore some of these cuts?
before when? We have, I mean, there are other things that can be done, but right now we wouldn't. If I understand your question.
I'm sorry, I don't understand your answer. So
I think I'm not understanding your question.
So is there still an opportunity to try to fund some of these things we tried to do through other means, if not from those sources that they stripped out?
Yeah, any additions at this point would require the approval of ENA.
ENA.
ENA was yesterday's meeting, that was their meeting, their last meeting.
Well, I mean, even this process required approval from ENA. So the process is really not any different. We could go in, find some other monies, talk about making some changes and other recommendations and send that over to ENA. That's this same process
Right.
for the budget itself. So yes, there's room for that.
Well, what I'm saying is that in terms of the time frame, ENA would have to meet again, because obviously you could not add something without ENA's approval, so.
Right.
And when is ENA's next scheduled meeting?
Well, that's next month. I mean, yesterday was their June meeting.
Alderman Behringer had a question on this.
No, I just want to make sure that people understand the process, so that when we say ENA doesn't meet till next month, and we don't pass this out before we go down, what happens to the budget? It's an automatic. I just want to make sure Alderman French understands the repercussions if we don't pass it out before we go down. That's all. Because we've been in this position before, and it's not pretty.
Right. The deadline is to have the budget prior to the beginning of the fiscal year, which is July 1. Now, without a final approval of the budget before that date, then the approval of the submission by Board of ENA would become the budget.
Sure, I understand that. Okay. What I guess what I'm also understanding is it may not be the will of the committee here to make recommendations today and ask ENA to meet again before the deadline. Would that be too much?
Yeah,
Oh, question over here.
thank you. I mean, just so that we're clear, the mayor and the comptroller and the president's budget becomes law if we fail to pass a budget by June 30th. That means, we are kind of crunched for time. And so I think we have to weigh these changes. You're getting a little something that you want, right? And you risk basically the existing budget becoming law, that's all.
I understand that, but we still have almost 2 weeks before that would happen, and so.
Well, you would have 2 Fridays.
We have 2 Fridays.
You've got 2 Fridays left, tomorrow
Oh, I'm sorry.
and the Friday after that.
That's all.
So finally passed.
That's correct.
Alderman Williamson has a question.
Just a question, just for knowledge purposes. Does the Board of ENA have the right to overrule if we don't make a decision, or, they have the last final say, so how does that exactly work, Paul? So if we did make a decision within the 2-week period, can he overrule us?
Well,
Without our vote is what I'm saying.
Well, there's a default process built into the charter and the budget process of the charter. And that default process gives that the budget director submits it to the Board of ENA, the ENA submits it to the Board of Aldermen, and then you start your hearings. But each process requires the approval by a certain date. The Board of ENA submits it to the Board of Aldermen 60 days prior to the beginning of the fiscal year, and the Board of Aldermen approves or changes whatever to that budget prior to the start of July 1st, and if that does not occur, then the budget as approved by the Board of ENA becomes the budget. So it's sort of by default. In that charter, it was basically crafted to ensure that one way or another, we have a budget that's balanced by July 1. So I think that's a positive thing. I know it's a good thing when credit rating agencies and everyone is saying, hey, you are at least avoiding prior years where budget debates went on till December and things like that, and it predates me. But so there's a reason for doing that. But that's what the status is currently.
But if this committee or this board wishes to find some additional money, cut that, and make a recommendation where to put it, that can still happen even after this process as it relates to the budget. And then that was the question, if I understood your correction correctly.
Sure, and so your money gets transferred
Right.
all the time.
Now, of course, we know that it requires the approval of ENA to do so. But the approval of ENA and that is no different than this process right here.
So you're suggesting different from approving the budget itself?
Yes, I'm saying that after, say, the budget is approved.
Okay.
At any time, this committee could make other recommendations, recommend other cuts and other additions in relationship to the budget, but it would still require approval from ENA, which is no different than the budgetary process.
You could make recommendations of budgetary transfers, but it wouldn't, but again, that would be subject to ENA, and even on the reduction side, because then you do have a budget, and so it's different. I mean, you have an approved budget at that point. So then, I mean, you could always, as the normal progress of the budget improves, you would like to see something, it would be the similar as a request to ENA as you normally would during the year, and when something comes up that you need to address. But the budget itself would be in existence.
Right.
Yes.
But I'm speaking of the portion of this committee's relationship or this board's relationship to ENA.
Correct.
Even in the budget process, it requires their approval.
Correct.
And so any changes like that, but after the budget's in place, you recognize as a transfer, but it would still require the approval of ENA.
Yes, even the difference being that even the reductions at that point would as
require
well,
that.
because it would be part of the budget already. Right.
Okay. Were there any other comments or questions? Okay. First, we need to make a motion just to put the committee sub before us. Am I correct on that?
Second.
Been moved and seconded that we put committee sub for Board Bill number 1 before the committee. Any discussion on the motion? If not, Mr. Clerk, would you call the roll?
Alderman Cruzen. Alderwoman Florida.
Aye.
Alderman Behringer.
Aye.
Vice Chairman Williamson. Alderman Moore. Alderman French.
No.
Alderman Vaccaro. Alderman Carter. Chairman Kennedy.
Aye.
6 aye votes, 1 no vote. Board Bill 1 committee sub stands before the committee.
Okay, we now can entertain a motion to adopt Board Bill number 1. Committee substitute for Board Bill number 1.
Second.
Been moved and seconded that we adopt committee substitute for Board Bill number 1 with due pass recommendation and a request for previous roll. Any opposition to previous roll? Seeing no opposition to previous roll, by your vote, we have adopted committee substitute for Board Bill number 1. I believe that's all on our agenda for today. We will have a committee meeting next Tuesday to hear several other bills, and even possibly the following, next Thursday as well. Okay? All right, with that, our meeting is... 9 a.m. 9 a.m., yes. With that, our meeting is adjourned.